heard that Kath Hartley had a close family bereavement yesterday, so I would be surprised if she makes an appearance remotely, but she may. But meanwhile, I'm in the chair for this afternoon. So, do we have any apologies? Please.
Yes, Chair, you've received apologies from obviously Councillor Kath Hartley, Councillor Samia Akhtar, Councillor Alan Taylor, Councillor Rizwan Jalil, Councillor Linda Bigham and Councillor Adrian Andrew.
Any others?
Councillor Bob Parker. Yes. Councillor Parker, Councillor Mark Parker.
Thank you.
I know too many people called Parker, and Councillor Alden should be joining online, I hope.
Thank you.
Sorry, Anne Shaw will be joining, but she's just running a few minutes late.
Thanks. Any item 2, any declaration of interest?
No, Chair.
None. Item 3, Chair's remarks. I've got some, if I can lay my hands on them.
No.
The first. Yeah. Hang on. Yeah, I've got them. This has kindly been scripted by Mr. Bond. So let's have a look here. The first thing to say is, in any case, thank you everybody for the work you put in over the year, and I obviously include officers as well as elected members. We don't know what will happen in May, and some people perhaps more or less willingly might not be with us after. So this is the last meeting of the current municipal year, and so thanks everyone for your input over the past municipal year. Now, here are the items that Kath would have raised under Chair's remarks. First of all, Kev's coaches. I'm just going to read it out, actually. We were devastated to hear of the major fire which broke out on Friday night at one of our local and smaller bus operators, Kev's Coaches in Bromsgrove. Kev's run 5 of our contracted subsidised services for the region, which unfortunately were unable to receive a service on Saturday. Sadly, most of the buses were completely destroyed in the blaze which ripped through the premises. The company have prioritised getting school services back on the road today. That would be today, and are working with Transport for West Midlands to get bus services back from tomorrow where possible. And Kevs have received an enormous amount of offers of help to get things up and running as quickly as possible. If anything further is required, John is up to speed and can brief. Is there anything to add, John?
Perhaps a little bit. As you can imagine, it's been a difficult weekend with what's occurred. They've lost 21 vehicles out of 22, so they are taking. It will take some time for them to get back up and be fully operational. However, they have met this morning with their vehicle leasing company, and they are hopeful that they'll have a number of vehicles available for them tomorrow to commence service. The important thing for us has been ensuring that passengers are aware of the lack of provision on those tendered routes. So we have put in place quite a significant campaign to let members of the public know. Due to the nature of the way it's happened, that's obviously been electronic at the moment, so social media, Facebook, Twitter, our own disruption pages, and via the electronic displays at the bus stops. If it's looking likely that the delays are going to go on longer than the next day or so, then we'll look to get printed information at the bus stops. We're working with the staff at KEVS just to understand exactly when they can get service provision back in place, but we'll keep you posted through with some briefings as we go forward in the next day or so. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. Next one is Metro. Sorry. Next one is Metro services. Metro was a matter of significant discussion at the last meeting, more of which is on the agenda for today, but to note the reintroduction and maintaining of the extended service to the library in Birmingham during February. On Ring and Ride, I've got 3 more. Ring and Ride, we're pleased to see that passenger numbers on Ring and Ride have started to climb back up again following the end of Plan B restrictions for COVID, with passenger numbers going over 2,800 last week for the first time. Renewal is now on a plan to expand its operating hours and days to start to move back to pre-pandemic operations. Next is National Express and Stagecoach. You will have seen coverage of this, I'm sure. We've been hearing in previous months about the proposed acquisition by National Express of Stagecoach Group, which has been a matter reported in the press since the late autumn of last year. But last week it was reported to the press that Stagecoach was likely to accept a counteroffer from another group and reject the National Express offer. This will mean that there will be no change in the region for now, although as Stagecoach is a provider in Coventry of a reasonable size, then Transport for West Midlands will be working with them to understand any potential changes from the latest news. So I think that's something you'll be coming back to us on.
But we will, yeah.
Okay. Finally, bus and light rail funding. We have a briefing paper on the bus and light rail funding, but worth noting that the government has approved a further package of funding for COVID recovery to take the ongoing payments to bus operators to the start of October 2022. The government have also indicated that the funding package will be available to the West Midlands for an additional 3 months, taking the total to 9 months, in order to maintain network stability for the forthcoming Commonwealth Games period. However, Transport for West Midlands is yet to learn of the overall quantum of funding, the gap that this will leave with private operators, and if this will have any immediate impact on bus services, and continue to work with the FT to understand the details in full. Now, that is an agenda item, item 12, so if there is any discussion, we'll take it at item 12. So that's sort of Chair's remarks. And now we go on to the minutes. So first of all, item 4, are there any matters of accuracy? There's not a lot of pages there, so if anybody's got anything to raise, could you just shout on?
Yeah.
Yes? 1, 2, yeah. Oh, go on then, yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I raised in the last meeting about the metro track from Operation Street to the New Street Station needing major repairs twice in a very short period of time, costing millions of pounds. It's not mentioned anywhere in the minutes.
Tanya?
Yeah, that's fine. The minutes are not is it verbatim of the whole meeting? It's a summary of discussion. But if you want that included, I can put that back in to the minutes.
Yes, we do.
Sorry, it is in there, but it's been accidentally credited to me. It's been credited. It's in there, but it's been. I asked a question on. Can I have an update on the briefing note? And then you asked a question on, can I have an update on the tram? And then that's been, both of them have been credited to me by accident, I think is the issue. Obviously, you know, it's fine, but if we're doing it for accuracy, I've accidentally taken credit for a good question.
Okay.
Councillor
I'll
Huxtable.
revisit it.
Yeah, Councillor Huxtable. Then Councillor Stanley.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. On page 3, I raised a question about the number 11 bus service and then raised a question in relation to cross-city network passage 3 and a bridge along the Alcester Road South. In the minutes, it's the Alcester Road. The Alcester Road and the Alcester Road South are 2 completely different roads. And the bridge is definitely along the Alcester Road South.
Yeah.
The mistake is repeated later on in that paragraph. I would suggest that's amended appropriately, and I would hope, pressing my luck, that officers would confirm in terms of matters arising that that has been actioned, because we don't appear to have an action tracker either.
I think that shows my lack of knowledge of Birmingham. But that's fine. I can obviously make that change. And the action tracker, I have done one, and it is here. But it wasn't included in the pack, unfortunately. But I will send that out to you. It is included, and I did do the action tracker. So apologies for that.
No problem.
yeah, just in terms of the action, we'll give you an update at the future meeting if that's okay. Councillor, it's quite a big item to turn around in 4 weeks, as I'm sure you imagine.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For your information of the committee, I'm referring to the bottom of page 3, where I asked 2 questions. And just to let you know that I've not received a reply on either from the gentleman that replied to me to say he would get back to me either on Berkeley Island or the poor service operating on the number 1 at Wolverhampton to Brylee. Rather disappointed because the service is certainly getting worse from practical experience myself, and I would have thought that they would have had the courtesy by this time a month to have got back to me. Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Stanley, I think that's a matter arising and I appreciate that. So I don't think it's a question of accuracy, is it? It's just that you haven't got the response.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, okay. John?
Yeah, apologies, Councillor Stanley. I believe on the first item, we have sent you details of the burnt tree scheme, probably by email on the day of the meeting. But I'll re-forward it to you so that you can come back to us with any questions. And apologies if you haven't had the response on Service 1. We'll look to get that to you as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further matters arising? Can we accept those subject to the matters arising that have been raised? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Now, I think we move on to matters arising, don't we? Are there any further matters arising? No?
Sorry, I have one.
You have one.
I have one. It's just to note, really, the Transport Scrutiny Subcommittee will be taking part in a private briefing on the technical evaluation of the tram fleet following the service suspension on Wednesday, the 23rd of March from 12 till 1. And TDC members will be invited to that, and a calendar invite will be circulated shortly to you all.
Thanks, Tanya. That's very helpful. Any further matters arising? No. So, on we go. Financial monitoring report. Councillor Advertise.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is the latest financial monitoring report reporting on expenditure up to 31st January 2022 and the Q3 forecast update. As to revenue budget, the year-to-date revenue position as at the end of January is showing an overall favourable variance of £4.4 million against the budget. As reported throughout the year to the committee, these savings are primarily driven by lower concessions during the pandemic and subsequent recovery period. Other savings are as reported in the year and relate to accessible transport and staffing variations. The forecast position was refreshed in January, and the reported position now reflects the expected year-end outturn. The favourable variances reported above have been reflected in that position. These are partly offset by an increase in metro operational costs due to unprecedented rises in energy costs. After reflecting these variances, the expected outturn is surplus of £5.7 million, and that is 3.6 million of this will be carried forward to support the 2022-23 revenue budget as agreed by WMCA board in February. The remaining £2.1 million will be earmarked to provide some resilience against specific risks in the transport network for 2022. Mr. Chairman, as to capital budget, year-to-date spend on the transport capital programme is £241.7 million, which is £105.3 million below the budget. The main drivers of this variance are the investment programme portfolio, which is £57.6 million under budget, and the Commonwealth Games programme, which is £28.4 million below budget. Within the investment programme portfolio, Number one, Birmingham East Side Metro Extension, which is £22 million favourable due to rescheduling of project programme and payment profile for HS2 utility diversion into next financial year. Number two is Vinsberry to Brylee Hill Metro Extension, which is £16.2 million favourable due to rescheduling of utility work and rephased construction. Number three is regarding rail, Walsall to Wolverhampton local enhancement package, which is £5.1 million favourable due to delayed land acquisition. The main driver of the variance within the Commonwealth Gain portfolio is the Sprint project, which combined are £21.7 million below budget. Construction work is increasing across the schemes with no impact on completion dates. This underspend is offset by accelerated drawdown of funding for the Alexander Stadium redevelopment of £7.1 million. Other major schemes expenditure at the end of November was £14.7 million below budget. The main variance relates to cross-city bus city centre package. As to minor work programme spend is £1.8 million below budget due to lower than expected claims from local authorities. As to grants to local authority expenditure at the end of January was £2.9 million below budget, largely due to the rephasing of one scheme into next financial year. And with that, I hand over to Kate.
Thank you, Councillor. So no further comments to add other than let's take any questions.
Members, any questions or comments? Okay, so the recommendations are for you to note. You agreed? Okay, on we go then to item 7. Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I would like to present to the committee the Capital Programme Delivery Monitoring Report. The committee is recommended to note achievements since the January meeting of the TDC, to note the progress of deliverables and outturn of the 2021-22 capital programme, to note where indicated any variation from the baseline programme. The last reporting period has seen a significant shift in the removal of COVID-19 restrictions. This is a positive step which will support the ongoing delivery of our capital programme. It is recognised that there is a lot of delivery activity taking place across the West Midlands and nationally. So we are keeping a close eye on the availability of resources and material. The following achievements have been completed during January and February. As to Dudley Interchange, a preferred contractor has been identified with discussion ongoing to formally engage them in contract to deliver the interchange. Formal appointment is expected in this month. The head lease for the farm food building has been secured by DMBC, making the key route network safer. The first international road assessment program, Black Country Workshop, has taken place and was successful in informing relevant local authority stakeholders of the purpose and significance of the project. Harrybar Rail Station and bus interchange, continued positive progress with construction work on the station building and original scheme scope. Glazing has been installed with cladding and public groundwork underway. Please see Appendix 3 for pictures. University Station, development on cladding, glazing and internal fit-out works continues to schedule and progressing well. Once again, please see Appendix 3 for pictures. Transport for West Midland Asset Renewal Programme. Significant progress has been made with the delivery of the 2021-22 programme, which includes various assets, upgrades to bus station, highway infrastructure, and park and ride sites. West Midland Cycle Hire Scheme. Positive progress has been made in sourcing a scheme sponsor and tendering the project. This opportunity is expected to go out to the market at the end of February 2022. The committee should note the following exception during the reporting period. University Station, revision of baseline date to reflect a two-stage entry into service. Stage 1. Interim state July 2022 will deliver wider platform, canopies and public ground which will be available for Commonwealth Games. The full station will be available in summer 2022 under stage 2. Full delivery will be in September 22. I will now hand over to Sandeep to pick out further details and take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Akhtar. As always, Councillor Akhtar has picked out all the key points. Just one clarification to make, and that is the West Midlands Cycle Hire and the tendering process for the sponsorship that has actually gone out to the market now, but it hadn't done at the time of the writing of the report. So that is moving in line with that progress that is expected. The only other thing I would say, just linking back to the capital, just the finance capital report and some of the spend profiles, whilst we are very clear about the end dates for things like Sprint and when they will be delivered by, there is contractual end dates that will take longer to bottom out, and that is why some of the financial profiles don't necessarily reflect all the on-the-ground delivery that will be taking place prior to the Commonwealth Games. But happy to take any further questions from the committee.
Before people ask questions, what I would like to suggest is that if you've got something on University or Perry Bar, we do have an item at agenda item 12. So I prefer to take that discussion there if that's okay with people.
Thank you, Chair. I have a slight problem with this because reading the dashboard, the colour dashboard, number 4 for Perry Bar, we see it as amber red and the direction of travel as worse. Whereas in the report that you referred to later on, it says works are progressing well. Now I have trouble with those two being contradictory. I'm happy to take it later, but I'd like to flag that one up now, that, you know, it appears contradictory.
I'm happy to close that one out now, actually. So it's quite a simple explanation. So as set out in the paper and in the RAG table, whilst the overall progress is for the actual station build is going as per the schedule, there is a risk with the work that has been added in as a later part of the scope, which was to address the cross-fall work required on the platform. So this was an additional piece of work that's been added into the programme. The reason why the rating has moved toward the amber red is in relation to the potential schedule impact in getting the required time for Network Rail for disruptive possessions to undertake and complete that work. So that is the reason why it's shifted in terms of the overall delivery confidence. In terms of where we are, there is a potential schedule impact, but all the information that we have today, it is that we are still anticipating the opening date in May 2022 to be maintained. But it's because it's a risk that's been flagged, the delivery confidence assessment does trip it over into the amber red classification. But that is specifically in relation to the works around the cross-fall of the platforms. But in terms of the overall, programme for the station remains as per the original progress.
You okay with that?
I'm okay with that. I do have a supplementary or a second, one, and that is Park and Ride, which I think is number 7 on the. I understand the reasons why during COVID it's been suspended, put on hold. Completely understand that. When are we going to make a decision to take it off hold? And if I recall from previous TDC meetings, there were some stations we were progressing on anyway, despite COVID, but that appears to have fallen off the description. So could those questions be answered, please?
Thank you, Councillor Huxtable. In terms of Park and Ride, as part of the CRSTS proposals and the submission that has gone into government, there is an inclusion for some funding, particularly development funding around Whitlock's End, Tile Hill, supporting the work at Tile Hill, but also some work ongoing at Minworth. Now, we are still awaiting the feedback around the CRSTS programme. So once we've got clarity around that, we will then take those schemes off hold and then have a realigned programme for the activity that will support the ongoing development.
I've got Councillor Grinsell and then Councillor John, and right, and you too.
Thank you, Chair. Sandy, regarding the West Midlands Cycle Hire Scheme, I'm pleased that we've now confirmed that we have started the tender. Can you tell me if there's been any commercial interest thus far, or is it too early to say?
I'm happy to answer that, Councillor Grinsell. The short answer is yes. We've been working with an agency for a number of months now to sort of understand where the commercial opportunity around the sponsorship sits and the likely value of that. So there has been a number of conversations that have taken place with a number of organisations who are interested in the scheme. But because it is about buying in a service, we have to follow a procurement process to actually make sure we can assess all those interested parties in that process. We expect that to conclude over the next 6 to 8 weeks in terms of that procurement process that we will go through. So, you know, it's a good sign of the interest that's been shown from a potential sponsorship opportunity.
Can I just come back?
Sure.
Thank you, Sandy. That's helpful. Just a thought, really, because we are 7 councils in this combined authority, and obviously, for instance, if I said Solihull is synonymous with JLR, but would there be a potential to have multiple within the different areas of the combined authority? It's just a thought that literally when you're answering the question came to me as a possibility.
And again, Councillor, the work that we've done, we've engaged with the market quite a lot and done quite a lot of soft testing to understand what approach would work well for the West Midlands. The approach that has come back as the most preferred one, and this is from the market as well, is to have one primary sponsor. But we did look at options where you could potentially break it down into smaller chunks, either by local authority area or, you know, or different ways of primary sponsors, secondary sponsors, and so on. But in terms of what the market is more interested in is one primary sponsor, but it also then gives us a greater visibility of the scheme as one scheme across the entire region. So that is the approach that we have gone out to the market on. But again, going out to the market is the proper way of testing who is interested, even though there's been conversations that have happened with some interested organisations. It's only until we get the tenders back and understand what sort of interest are they putting in. So we will keep this committee informed of that progress as we go through it, but we are hopeful for quite a good positive outcome from that process when it concludes.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor John.
Hi, thank you. My question and my concern is, and I'm not sure if this has been flagged up, Hampstead train station. Now, we know that a lot of the visitors that will be visiting will be using public transport, and Hampstead is probably one of the train stations that's been flagged down where a lot of visitors will be using. However, there is a bit of a cause of concern in regards to the safety. Now, residents that live around there have raised their concerns for a refuge or additional for safety and us for them to cross a pedestrian crossing, because when the lights change at Rocky Lane on from Hampstead to Rocky Lane, the lights within seconds change, and when visitors as well as the residents that are using the train station, they are saying that they cannot cross safely. Now we have basically I've started a petition, and we had a site visit with Highways. However, we was just wondering if potentially Hampstead train station could get involved with supporting a safety refuge for visitors as well as the community that are residing there, to have a safety, some safety elements put in. And I was just wondering if that is something that you could support us with. Thank you.
Can I just come in and say I agree with what you're saying, because I know that crossing and it is quite scary.
Thank you, Councillor Jan. We will pick that one up with Birmingham City Council, obviously, as part of BCC Highways. I will need to check with our games operational teams and the work that's been done around the transport plan already, around how the demand at that station will be managed as well. And I'm sure Anne, if she's got a hand up, I can see, and may have some further insights into that as well.
Yeah, so yeah, sorry, apologies for not being there today, but you wouldn't want to catch what I've got in terms of a bad cold. So, but in terms of what you've just mentioned, Councillor Jan, Perry Bar Station is the main station for the games. So we will be making sure through the travel demand management programme that people will be using both to arrive and to leave any events at Alexander Stadium. Hampstead is part of a resilience plan should there be any issues at Perry Bar Station as well. So as part of that resilience, we will look at what you're suggesting just to see what's possible to make it safer as well. So we'll pick that up with the team. And I know Graham Jones this morning gave a bit of a presentation on games planning. I'm not sure if everybody attended that, but we'll pick it up as an action if Tanya can put that on the action tracker.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbert.
My main question actually has been asked already by you. It's about the cycle scheme. So I wanted to find out if any sponsors have come forward yet. But in addition to that question is, how did you advertise for the sponsors to come forward? Did you do that local authority basis? So we have 7 local authorities, because I can't remember seeing any of that in my emails. So did you ensure that the 7 local authorities were informed and if they took part in the whole scheme going to the market to source for sponsors?
Thank you, Councillor. We have to follow a very procurement compliant process for that, so it is in line with any other tendering process that we would put out. So it goes out via our Bravo e-portal system, which goes to every single supplier who is on that portal. But there's also the release that's been put out to the local authorities around that. So any interest would have to come in back via that Bravo e-tendering portal that we use for buying or procuring any services on behalf of the combined authority.
Okay. Councillor Val.
Thanks, Councillor Chairman of Birmingham City Council, for those people watching the webcast. My question is to Sandeep. With the series of events, unexpected events like COVID, now the conflict in Ukraine, causing inflation and rising prices, how is that impacting on our capital works program? And have you got any strategy to mitigate the events causing issues to your capital works program? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lowell. In terms of the schemes currently under delivery, with the loss of them, we are towards the back end of delivery. So we've managed those risks through that programme. As part of any of the capital delivery, there will always be inflation contingency built in as part of the overall risk pots and the contingency pots that we have. We are keeping an eye on the situation. We understand that there will be pressures on some of those costs, particularly the supply of materials, fuel costs, etc., just in terms of making construction more expensive than it currently is now. We'd like to think for the schemes that are near market, that will be accommodated within those contingencies and the risk pots that we have allowed for. But as we move into the next round of funding, particularly through some of our larger programmes, we will need to consider the impact on the initial cost estimates, and as we go through that development work and understand exactly what those inflation rates are doing to reflect that in the cost properly. But that is something, and as we set out in the start of the introduction to the capital programme, it's something that we're keeping a very close eye on in terms of not just as a result of the impact of what's going on with fuel prices, but the demand for materials and the work that is happening nationally is starting to change that supply base quite considerably. But it's one that we will continue to keep an eye on as we go through the delivery of those programmes.
Chair, if I come back, all funding was based on the regional costs. Now, as the costs have changes, and we may be going over the budget, would we have any sort of support from the government that we can go back to them and give us the extra support to cover up the additional costs?
We often struggle getting additional funding out of government. So, once we get the funding that is allocated to the area as part of the programme, it's for us to manage that within the programme. Like I say, we build in contingencies, and those are based on the best market information we can get around what construction inflation is doing. So we will reflect that within those numbers. We will undertake some fairly robust risk assessments and make sure we have confidence around a quantified risk assessment, again, to inform the costs and the likelihood of some of those risks materialising. And in any programme, the only way you would be able to manage it, if you can't manage it through that, would then need to be through some reprioritisation of the programme. But the likelihood of getting additional funding for those aspects is very unlikely. It is for us to manage that within the programme that we get through those strategies.
Anything further on this item? Okay, so the report is for noting as set out on page 17. You happy with that? Okay. So we go on to item 8. Hello, Sophie. As far as I'm concerned, I present that as set out. And is there anything you want to say by way of introduction?
Thank you, Councillor. Just really to say, obviously the report contains a lot of information about Metro performance over the last few months. Just really by way of update, since the report was issued, we are now operating a 10-minute service during the day rather than a 12-minute service, which was specified in the report, as things are improving with our tram availability. Also, we intend to launch our Metro ticket zones on the 28th of March, and today we've provided information as to the new ticket options available for our customers. Thank you.
Members? Yes. Chris.
Thank you. I've got a few questions. So the way I'll do it is I'll justify what I'm asking, and then they're sort of broken down into sections. I think there's about 6 questions in total, unfortunately. So it might take me a couple of minutes to get them off. But yeah, so I want to start on something really positive. It's nice to see the Metro patronage grow, and it's nice to see that smooth curve. I think we might all be a bit along, there's a bit of a plateau, but that's possibly to be expected with new working habits. But that's my polite bit out of the way. I want to discuss point 5.3, I think it's on page 30 of the agenda pack, that covers the Metro fare zones, which you've just teased me up to ask about, really. It's mentioned that many of the changes have come off the back of a questionnaire or a survey that was done by Transport for West Midlands. Is it possible that we can see a copy of those questions themselves, even if we can't see the responses? Because there's a few specific questions I've got with that, because I'm a researcher myself, so these are the things that went through my head. What borough were the respondents from? Were those respondents from their boroughs representative of the West Midlands, or were they representative of the patronage of the Metro? Because they would produce 2 very skewed different sets of answers. And it said that they discussed distance-based, flat fares and zonal fares. And I'd be intrigued to see their responses, because normally when I'm thinking about this, how I'd have thought that people would have been distance-based rather than zonal sensitive. If I were to apply sort of logic, they'd want to pay for what their ticket costs for where they're going rather than being bound by zones. And when they were prompted to speak about zones, were they shown the proposed zonal map, or were they just asked to speak about zones as a conjecture or an idea that's in their head? So if I return to a different part of the report, this report calls the zones a positive development to create intuitive pricing, direct quotes, which lets customers only pay for what they use. But my concern there is I don't know if I can hold those two ideas to be true at once, because if you were to pay for what you used, what you'd be paying for is distance-based usership. In this case, they're paying for the zones they use, even if they only use one stop in each zone. So I don't necessarily hold those ideas to be true. And we've said that it's important that customers aren't priced out of connectivity, but am I missing something there? Because that seems to be a tacit acknowledgement that some people's prices might go up and some people's prices might go down. So I've got a question on that, because if we're considering could they be priced out of connectivity, are we expecting some prices to go up? Now, moving on. If we say this is a simpler and more transparent system, I'll tolerate this for the sake of argument in this room. But if the ticketing is going to go back office, which it is when Swift takes over, does it actually matter how complicated the tickets are? Because people won't see the tickets when they're zonal or not. So does that matter? And crucially, this report says that metro zones were considered that they would align them to the rail zones. This hasn't been done because, you know, it's impractical. But one of the reasons they said it was impractical is that it would introduce an oversized Birmingham. But I don't think that that's necessarily true, because if we look now, we now have two different sets of zones, rail, and we have metro zones. And I think that A, obliterates the idea that this is simple and transparent, because now people have to learn two sets of zones. But also, I don't think the justification that Birmingham's too large in that holds up to scrutiny, because the Birmingham zone, or zone 1, as it's called in this, is due to contain 11 spots. Even when the East Side Metro extension comes about, it'll have even more than 11 spots in. But then we look at the Wolverhampton zone in zone 4, that only has 4 spots in it. So actually, as it stands, Birmingham already is in this system massively engorged compared to the Wolverhampton zone. So how are we justifying that one zone has 4 stops in it and one zone has 11 stops in it? That's just something I'd like to clarify, because I'm sure there's a really obvious answer that I'm missing, but at the moment I can't follow why that is. But when you start to ask that, you're delivered to a new set of questions. We weren't actually provided the map in this report pack of where the zonal fares are. So we've been asked to comment on a map that we haven't been given. But I managed to find this map, and the map doesn't have, you know, the East Side extension on it or the Brylee Hill extension on it. Now, indicatively, we're being asked to discuss and give responses on how we think zonal fare systems would work going forward, but we haven't been prepared for what this zonal fare system will look like in the future. And then that sort of brings me to my final question, which is a very Wolverhampton-focused question. If we do 2 comparisons, because this is where my concern is, so all of those questions will line up to a narrative that hopefully will address this concern. So this is my fundamental question. If we do 2 life comparisons, someone living in a relatively wealthier area of the conurbation, let's say they live in the Jewellery Quarter, which I know it does contain Hockley, that is a relatively wealthy part of the conurbation compared to, for instance, parts of Dudley, Walsall, Wolverhampton. Now, if someone lives there, they live on the Zone 1 border. They, for a Zone 1 single ticket, will be able to travel 11 stops to Edgbaston. Now, they can travel the entire city centre within Zone 1. Now, if we look at the other end of the system, let's look at Bilston, which is a relatively impoverished area of Wolverhampton. They won't be able to make a 4-stop trip to Wolverhampton without buying 2 zonal tickets. So, how can we justify that someone in Bilston who needs to go to the council office will have to buy a 2-zone ticket, or someone in Wolverhampton that relies on cheap groceries from Bilston Market will have to have a 2-zone ticket, even if they're only travelling 4 stops. But someone travelling between 2 relatively well-off areas of Birmingham can have 1-zone ticket and travel 11 stops. How can that be justified? It just can't be there. And it said that this is a simpler system. It said that it's intuitive, that it's, you know, intuitive, that it's innovative. Actually, when you look at that particular context, it seems punitive. And I suppose my one thing is, how can we fit Birmingham almost in its entirety into 1 zone? But we've split Bilston off from Wolverhampton, an impoverished area that's really, I think there might be people having trouble to pay for tickets if they go up in price. And I didn't think that that would be an issue until I read that thing in there saying, how can we mitigate rising costs? Can you sort of allay some of those concerns? Sorry, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. As you're aware, I'll be taking you through these in some detail at a separate meeting. But what I wanted to say, just going through some of the points, trying to take them as they were sort of like presented. In terms of the research, what we did do, it was led by Transport for West Midlands. We spoke with customers in terms of a focus group, and we also did share with them information of how zones would look. We did consult with them in the different options in terms of flat fare, zonal fares and distance-based fares, and along with other criteria, which objectives which we were trying to achieve, the zonal fare structure was the preferred option. So there was a lot of work which did go on in the background, and we did consult with customers to get their input into this process. In terms of, you mentioned distance-based intuitive pricing for what they use, distance-based, and you suggest that may always be the correct format of how we do it. I think what we look at as well is usage. So we have data looking at what people's travel patterns actually are. So we use that in the basis of forming where these zones and borders align. So your concern was that people are not priced out of connectivity, with some prices going up. Just to clarify, the vast majority of people will see their prices remain the same or be lower. There will be a smaller proportion of prices which will go up, but for a lot of people this will be a saving or no change. And obviously there is also increasing prices in terms of operating metro, etc. So we still need to be sustainable in terms of how we do set our fares. But for the vast majority of people, there will be no change, or their prices will go down. In terms of Swift, you mentioned that we can tap in and tap off, which will give you a fare. That's okay if you wanted to pay on ad hoc journeys, but what this does do is allow people who purchase season tickets to purchase a season ticket just for their zone. That was never previously an option, so if you wanted to buy a metro ticket, you had to buy a metro day ticket, season ticket, month or weekly pass to cover the whole line. What this now does do is give customers a choice to purchase a season ticket, be that a monthly or a weekly, just for the zone which they're travelling in. So it's in that reference that we talk about people being able to pay for what they use. So if you were a previous season ticket holder, you would have to purchase a ticket for the entire metro. Now you can purchase a ticket just for the zones which you use, and that should save people some funds. So the question regarding aligning with rail zones, we obviously did consult with rail and understand that at the moment they themselves are going through a fundamental change of rail zones, because they themselves understand that the zonal structure as it is perhaps not quite right and fit for purpose. So they're doing a lot of work on that, and we will of course continue to work with them, because an ultimate objective will be to get something which is more integrated and more seamless. So that is still on the table, and we will continue to work with them. We couldn't hold off our changes, which we do need now for many reasons, whilst that rail work was going on. My understanding is that's more longer term. It's not something what would be implemented, and I'm sure you're familiar with the rail sort of like environment. These kind of changes in rail could take some time, and Metro were unable to wait for that period. However, we commit to continuing to work with rail to understand how we can better align as part of their work. The question regarding zones for Birmingham and zones for Wolverhampton, what you will find, the Birmingham zone is slightly higher premium than the Wolverhampton zone, which you refer to, and that does reflect the fact that Birmingham does have more stops within that zone, and as you quite rightly say, will include the extensions as well. So there is a slight premium, which obviously on the other end of the line is a cheaper fare in the Wolverhampton zone, full stop, rather than the Birmingham zone. So there are, that partially answers some of the questions in terms of pricing around that. I'm not sure if I've missed anything specific. There was quite a lot there, but hopefully that gives you some clarity that a lot of thought has gone into this, and we have considered our customers. And of course, I think the final thing to probably say is that we will obviously monitor and review this. We have committed to obviously doing customer research. Once it's embedded, we will of course do surveys and ensure customers can give us feedback, and from that we'll be able to fine tune it to ensure it is the best solution.
Thank you. If I just come with a supplementary on that, thank you. That was really holistic. I knew there'd be answers to them, but it's so they're on the record. It's good to have the answers. I suppose my final question is one you did forget to touch on, but I can rephrase it there, because you mentioned most people will see a saving, and because you can buy the zonal season tickets, that is a positive thing. My concern is it's not that there's fewer stops in the Wolverhampton zone. It's that for you to meaningfully use the tram from Wolverhampton, you're going to have to cross a zonal boundary, because at the moment it travels from Priestfield to Wolverhampton City Centre and no further. So my actual concern there wasn't just that there were only 4 stops, it's that why has it just not been amalgamated into that zone 3? Why is it a separate 4th zone that just has 4 stops in? Because what I fear that will cause is you've taken 2 poorer areas of Wolverhampton, split them up, and then they will always have to buy, instead of just a zone 4 ticket, they will always have to buy a zone 3 and 4 ticket, even if they're only travelling 5 stops, was the big concern. So Bilston to Wolverhampton, from your records, you'll know that's a really popular route, and it serves 2 less privileged areas, but they will always have to buy a zone 3 and 4 ticket. That's the concern there, because that will be a more expensive ticket than someone that does stay in zone 1, but travels 11 stops. That would be a cheaper ticket. Even if we went on the London model, other zonal fare systems, travelling 11 stops within one zone, even if it's zone 1, is cheaper than travelling 4 stops that cross a boundary normally, unless you have got a specific plan to stop the cost in Birmingham, Bilston and Wolverhampton, sorry, unless I'm not following something.
No, thank you. I think one of the other considerations is the distance which people will travel. So the distance between Bilston, which you're referring to, and obviously Wolverhampton, which will eventually be to the rail station, that distance is quite long. Whilst the city centre does have multiple stops, they are very much in close proximity within the city centre. So that is also considered. I think in the city as well, you'll see other modes of transport, what people can use, be that, you know, cycling, etc. But there is that distance element in the 2 regions, where Bilston to Wolverhampton is a longer distance than what potentially would be the Jewellery Quarter to Edgbaston route.
So in other words, you're not going to change anything at the moment, you're going to review it?
That's correct, and you know, obviously we always like to take our customers' feedback, and as part of this process we will do that, and any tweaks what we need to make as a result of that, we will endeavour to do so.
I've got Councillor Huxtable and Councillor Lal.
Thank you very much, Chair. My first question is following on from Councillor Burden. Just yes or no, if someone bought a zone 3 and 4 ticket, would it be cheaper than a zone 1 ticket? So that's the first question, because I understand with rail zones that would be the case, that if you just bought a 3, 4 and 5 ticket and not go through zones 1 and 2 in the rail system, that would be cheaper than, for example, buying a zone 1 through to 3 ticket. But putting that to one side, in terms of indications, do we have any indication as it expands from Edgbaston Village going out towards, going out on Hagley Road towards Dudley and Sandwell, where zone 2 would start? Ditto, and this point was raised earlier, indications about the Winsberry Brylee Hill extension, you know, where will Brylee Hill fall into the zonal system? Have we thought about park and ride rail metro heading? Because we see this on the rail system with the zonal things, that they look at zones and then go to the park and ride that gets them the cheapest travel. So if there are 2 railway stations with park and ride facilities close by, you you go to, and the cheaper one is further away, you head towards the one further away in order to park and ride, and only have to buy a zone 1 to 3 rail ticket, for example, rather than a zone 1 to 4 rail ticket. So what thought have we given to that? Because 2 of the zonal border stops are actually actually have park and ride facilities, Black Lake and Priestfield. So is that an issue? I think that's the majority of my questions, Chair.
I hope it's all of them. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. So your first question regarding whether a zone 3 and 4 ticket is cheaper than a zone 1. So a zone 1 in isolation is more expensive than the zone 3 and 4. And I think the question or the underlying maybe implication there is regards to the further out you get, is it cheaper than coming into the city? Which is one of the reasons why the city is obviously priced slightly higher. It is standard. We did do a lot of research in this before implementing the structure we have, and I know in Manchester city centre, for example, they do have a higher price in the city centre to avoid that cross-city transit and try to encourage other modes such as scooters, bikes, etc., to not congest the network. So I think that is where we're coming from in that. So that's why Zone 1 would also attract a more higher premium. The second question regarding the extensions and how we will zone around that. Again, that is work which will be done. It has been thought about in the background, but not in the detail where we're ready to present anything at this stage, but that will come forward as we come to open those extensions and understand the patronage flows, etc. And then just on that final point regarding park and rides, as you noted, you've got Black Lake and Priestfield. They actually fall in either zone. So for people travelling on those ends, travelling to those 2 park and rides, they would sit in either zone anyway and could travel in either direction. So the principle here is when you're on a border stop, depending on your direction of travel will determine the number of zones which you would pay for. And if you, for example, travel from Priestfield to Wolverhampton, you would only incur a charge for a zone 4. Thank you.
Thank you. So my question is that London had a long established zonal parking system for the transport network. Are we comfortable with them, or obviously being in West Midlands, are we make ourselves better than London? So how do we compare with the London zonal fares? And secondly, the flat fare is already popular. Are we retain the flat fare to keep the patronage growth? Or particularly, I'll be on Julie Quarter. I know that there's a £1 flat fare of the currently at the moment. Are you intend to keep it or change it? Because if that's going to be changed, then if the price goes up, that's certainly going to put some people off using our metros. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So just taking us back to the first question regarding how we compare to London, what we have done as part of the research for this, we have looked at other systems where they use zonal tickets. What we've done is what's right for us in the West Midlands. We've tailored ours to suit our customer flows, where people travel to the popular spots, park and rides, as Councillor said. So it is unique, so we do need to be mindful when we're drawing sort of like direct comparisons. The second point regarding the flat fare, so that was one of the options what we were looking at before we decided to move to zonal. Flat fare was considered. I think one of the issues with flat fare can be Sorry, I think I'm speaking myself. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I think one of the issues with flat fare, obviously, we also have to be cognizant that we need to generate sufficient revenues to ensure Metro is sustainable. So people need to be paying the price which is representative of the journey that they're about to take. So whilst flat fare was considered, it was not deemed sort of like the priority following the research what we did do. And fundamental to this, as we say, we've spoken earlier, and you were talking about the rising price of diesel, etc. on buses. Metro is not immune to the increases which we are being experienced across the transport network. Obviously, we use a lot of electricity to power the trams, and just as with other modes, we are seeing increases. So whilst we are trying to generate fares, we also have to be cognizant that we do need to be able to wash our face and cover some of those costs.
But in that case, that implies the people who are paying flat fare at the moment, they'll see changes, obviously with the higher fares. Have you done any work as what impact it will have on the passengers? That maybe have some people, they'll stop using the metro. So while I understand we need to have the revenue, have the services, profitable and commercially viable, but at the same time, if we go to customers, then that will have a knock-on effect on revenue. So have you done how much impact it will have on the users?
Okay, just taking that question. So in regards to the flat fare, as you're referring to, what we had was the city hop fares. What we've now got is zone 1 being from Jewellery Quarter into Birmingham, which was the previous city hop fare. What passengers will now be able to do, a lot of those fares were charged as a return kind of city hop. What the passengers can now benefit from is unlimited travel within that zone for the day. So we do not have a return ticket anymore. What we have is a single or a ticket which allows you unlimited travel for the day. So for many, it'll be a benefit that they can travel within that zone all day. So there are benefits for a number of our customers.
Councillor Ziaul Islam. Just a very simple question to clarify. I've got 100 trams. Out of it, how many are actually in operation now?
So at the moment, to deliver our service, it really does depend on what service we're offering. Today, we're offering a 10-minute service as of the 6th of this month. We increased from a 12-minute service. We do not tend to look at how many trams are actually out. We tend to look at how many we need, because we need to do the maintenance on the trams as well. So they're coming up to some of their life requirements where we need to replace parts. So it really does vary, but what I can say, we've got almost half of the fleet repaired. Just over half the fleet have now been repaired. So we are improving each week and adding more trams to our service as they become available.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Again, we're asked to. I have got a question actually, Sophie. Last Wednesday, I met a disabled user, a recumbent, hand-driven. He'd come from Walsall, a disabled campaigner, and we wanted to go to Cornwall Road because there was the first anniversary of the cycle hire scheme. So I said, do you know how to get there? And he said, no, but I know how to get to 16 Summer Lane. So I met him here. And the idea was we would go to St Chad's and then we would catch the lift and then walk along next to the tram tracks up to Cornwall Road. The lift was out of service. What that means is because there's no alternative access for disabled people, you can't use that stop. That was last Wednesday. I walked that way myself on the way here this morning. The lift is still out of service. That seems to be totally unacceptable to me.
Sorry, Councillor, obviously I'll take that away. I do know that the lift was out of service and was repaired, so I can only assume maybe it has sustained another failure. So I'll endeavour to look into that and come back to you with that. But it was repaired. I personally know that, having been involved in making sure of that. However, it may have subsequently failed, and I'll look into that.
It looked just the same as this time last Wednesday. Yes. Yes, Councillor Stanley, go on.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Same applies to Bilston. The lift at Bilston hasn't been working for quite a considerable amount of time now.
That's really important, thank you. I agree.
Yeah, so on both of those, it was on Friday when they was actually out repairing both lifts, so that's why I'll take that away and just understand if there's been a subsequent failure, but they were repaired on Friday.
In reply, it wasn't working on Saturday when I was in Bilston.
Okay, thank you, I'll take that.
Any further breakdowns? Right, so we're to note the report. You happy with that? Thanks a lot. Right. Item 9. Thank you, Sonny. I thought you had an easy time. Item 9. Sorry. Oh, right. Hello. Liam.
Yes, good afternoon. Sorry I couldn't be with you in person. Yeah, but apologies I couldn't be with you in person. I believe TDC just asked for an update on University in Perry Bar. Would you just like me to walk you through the paper very quickly?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So Perry Bar, we're really pleased with how things are going, and indeed I know members from around the table visited, I think last week, although it seems like a long time ago, to see the works for themselves, as well as the mayoral visit on Thursday. We're still on track to complete the station building in March. We are still within the £30.98 million budget for the station and the bus interchange. So all of that is looking good. People who've been there will have seen the internal fit out proceeding and the cladding going on around the outside of the building now as well. So that's well underway. As part of the work around the, as part of the work around the rail programme, one of the things we have to do is go through quite a stringent entry into service process. So that's the regulatory process to prove that what we're building is fit for purpose of the railway. We've therefore, since the end of last year, been talking to the Office of Rail and Road, with the regulator and other partners to make sure we're ready for that. Because what has been seen, I think, sometimes on other rail projects is if you leave that until the time you actually need to enter into a station into service, that's when problems emerge and delay starts. We've been trying to deal with that early. One of the things that was identified there was desire to do some more work to the platforms. We had said previously we put tactile paving on the edges of the platforms. The regulator was also very keen that we have a look at what's called the crossfalls. So that's the angle the platforms sit against the track. What we were able to do is actually agree with Network Rail that while we had contractors on site, we would do the work and Network Rail would fund it. So there's been no net increase in cost as a result of that work, but what it has done is actually it will deliver a significant improvement to the quality of the station, to the quality of the experience, and actually safety. And I think it's important as well, just to note, that's not just a matter of the Commonwealth Games, important though that is, that will actually deliver a long-term benefit to users for the station at Perry Bar. The bus interchange also is due for entry into service in May. There will be, I think, some public installation of public rail items, street furniture and things like that past May into June. But again, that's well on track. And we are looking forward to opening for the games. So that's Perry Bar. At university, I think this time last year, effectively, we broke ground. If you've been past it or seen it recently, you will see we now have glazing going in, cladding going on. It really is shooting up. And again, as we said with Perry Bar, we've been working very closely with the Office of Rail and Road, Network Rail and other partners as well, just to make sure that we have identified early any challenges that need to be addressed in order for us to enter the station into service. When we completed the full business case, we were looking at an opening summer 2022 and potentially an interim state, so a specialised state for the Commonwealth Games. We had worked hard to see if we could accelerate the project enough to bring everything into service in time for the Games. Where we've now landed is that we think it's more important to have a high level of confidence over some elements being ready for the Games rather than push for the whole lot and increase the risk. So what we're now saying is The existing station has been open throughout and will continue to be open. In time for the Commonwealth Games, the platforms will be widened at university. That will deliver a significant benefit to people who are waiting. There will be canopies over the platforms, and there will be the public realm available as well. And the station buildings will then be fully complete and open thereafter. It won't be a building site, so it's not that there will be cranes and people in orange jackets running around the place, but we will not be able to get all the buildings open in time for the games. However, as I say, there is a benefit there in terms of the passenger experience. People have got wider platforms, they've got covered platforms to wait on, and there is the new public rail available as well to help manage crowds. We've been talking closely with the Commonwealth Games team and with West Midlands Trains. And again, they are comfortable at the moment that this will work for the games. This will be a feasible, fit-for-purpose station for the games. I think the other thing I would note is that we've encountered some significant challenges on this project. Not least of those have been things like supply chain impacts. So we've been required to do things like run extra shifts to align with the availability of concrete. Some of the materials that have been specified have been very hard to get hold of. Things like cordon steel, so weathering steel, this sort of architectural steel that's being used on the rail link bridges, has been hard to get hold of. So we are particularly pleased, I think it's fair to say, that we have been able to maintain a similar kind of opening deadline. We have seen some increase to the baseline estimate completion, but again, that is partly reflecting a significant enhancement of scope, as well as some of these challenges. So the picture, the update also has some images in. The scheme has moved on even since we put those images in. The scaffolding has now come down off the front of the building, and as I say, work remains on track. The one other thing I will note that I think from a programme perspective we are really proud of, as well as our work that started at Walsall on the package 1 stations now, over the past year or so we've clocked 300,000 person hours across our sites. We've had no serious reportable accidents, and that's something I think it is something we're really keen to celebrate, because I think it really reflects on a commitment to safety that's come not just from the programme, but also actually from our partners, our contractors, from people who have been on site performing visits, and that's something we really want to celebrate. I will stop there. I don't know if there are any questions on the projects that people would like to ask.
Thank you, Liam, for your last point. That was so important and definitely worth celebrating. Can I say that I think the way to organise this discussion and the questions is to deal with Perry Bar first, and then if you need to come back, if you've got something to say about Perry Bar, please raise it, and then if you need to come back subsequently, I shan't stop you from doing it again on university. So, Timothy, you have something to raise?
I do, it's not so much with the programme. Really good though it is, because Perry Bar desperately needed work doing on it. I don't think there's any disagreement on that. It's the legacy that Perry Bar will leave once we've got our brand spanking new station. And what I would like to know is, where are we in terms of discussions with the train operators in the provision of additional services from Perry Bar after the Commonwealth Games, after the legacy this new brand spanking station will leave us, where we are, because at best, as I understand it, it's 2 trains per hour at the moment from Perry Bar station. It's one of the least served stations in Birmingham, and when we spend all this money on something that is absolutely essential for the Commonwealth Games and it leaves that legacy, how are we going to improve rail services for the people of Perry Bar and beyond going forward? So that's probably more a question for Sandeep rather than Liam.
You sure?
Thank you, Councillor. I will let Liam come in first if he's got any views on that. I will come back with some of the wider work that is ongoing.
I mean, the short answer there is I will take that back to colleagues who deal more closely with the operator, and we can confirm that separately. Timetable changes generally happen twice a year in the rail industry. At the moment, certainly it's not proposed there will be a change here in May, but we can go away and check thereafter about what current proposals are for future levels of service.
And just to add to it as well, and you're absolutely right, Councillor, there is a big amount of development and growth that is happening across Perry Bar, big changes around the area. So we will expect there to be changes in demand over time, and how will that then need to be reflected in the types of transport provision. There has been work done on the wider West Midlands rail strategy around how do we actually make sure that we are providing the right type of levels of service across the region based on that demand. But it will be an ongoing conversation with West Midlands Trains. We are still working through the impacts of post-pandemic recovery and what happens to actual patronage, and then what commercial decisions need to be taken around the provision of those additional services. So that is something that we will keep under review, but it's something that I will need to take back through the conversations that Malcolm and the team have with West Midlands Railway Executive and West Midlands Trains, and provide you with an update for the next meeting.
But I think it's correct, there's nothing in the plan at the moment.
Yeah, the assumption at the moment is the service levels will remain as per.
Okay, anything further on Perry Bar? I've got one, but some of us were there visiting the site. Does anybody want to come in on that? Chris?
It must be said that I was initially, when those first plans were forwarded, I was one of the first to say this looks awful, and then I was one of the first man loudly said it. And do you know what? I went there, and I will say I was convinced by how much work has been done. I was convinced that it looks like a functional, up to service station that actually the world will look at and say that's a good piece. That's a good thing in the local community. It was positive to see because it has been neglected. The British rail station that was there was awful. The initial replacement was bad, but what's been produced has actually produced something that I think will give people a much more favourable view of public transport for what it's worth. So actually, thank you to the officers for what's been done so far. I think we had a really positive visit to Perry Bar, and it was good to see. I look, next time I'll visit, hopefully I'll be on a train.
Well, you can fly through there at 75 miles an hour now if you want. Okay, anything further on Perry Bar? Celia?
Okay, I was one of the councillors that actually went there. I think that was about 10 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. But we did go there as well about 3 years ago. So the transformation is astronomical, definitely. We were having a conversation just with my colleague there. It's still, right. Yes, that's definitely a legacy that will be with us after the Commonwealth Game, just like the Commonwealth Game will be happening in our region. But again, you know, we keep banging on the actual effect of all of this to the local people. And, you know, just to remind us, you know, that element is still there. There's still a gaping hole there. Because, you know, just looking around, I'm not sure if there's a handful of people from Perry Bar or even around that area working there. And we do know the answers that come back. You know, these are jobs that you have to have some certain skills and stuff. So, you know, we should be using these opportunities to skill up our local people. So we're not just having shiny railway station, which we do appreciate, don't get me wrong. I don't want to sound like we're not appreciative of all of this. But we want to start seeing these whole developments have real impact on people's pockets, on families, on young people, on residents. You know, we want to see not just physical transformation, but financial transformations that translates in individual homes. That's what someone like myself actually wants to see, as well as infrastructural transformation.
Well done.
Anybody want to come back on that?
I mean, it's absolutely the right thing. We don't build transport for transport's sake. Transport is there to support our residents, our businesses, our communities, and the people who visit the region. So it absolutely needs to do that, and as part of the overall justification for the schemes that we develop and deliver, it is part of that much broader socio and economic business case that we put together. This is about access to opportunity, whether that's skills, whether it's employment, whether it's picking up the, we're changing the labour market considerably as a result of better transport infrastructure. That's what these schemes are designed to do, and that will be the legacy of them. So that's absolutely a key part of what these schemes have to do. It is about connecting them back into the communities that they serve, and that is a big part of the work that we will continue to do over the next sort of few months now. We've been through a really challenging time of delivering lots of transport infrastructure, and all the messaging has had to be how do we manage the demands on the network while we are disrupting it. We are now coming out at the other end with lots of new infrastructure being delivered, which will make a lot of difference to the communities that it serves, and it's making sure that we get that messaging, the promotion out there in the right way to ensure that people understand how it can change, like I say, access to skills, access to opportunity, and changes the labour market.
Thank
you, Chair. It is a comment, it's not a question. In Peribah, there are two things going on, which is the major things. One is the university, the station. Other one is the village, the athletic village. There are house building now going on, and it is quite a lot of, because I live in Peribah, and it takes about 45 minutes it is about 10-15 minutes journey to city centre, but it takes about 45 minutes sometimes. So because there are lots of, the taxi driver, they are complaining, they are, because they are, losing their income because of the waiting time. They can't charge the, the passengers. So it is, I'm not saying, criticizing, but I don't know how soon the community will be a bit better. Because it is in March now, which is almost middle of March now. So because if we think of July that we might get something in place, then it's still, people will be, the local people will be suffering. This is just a comment. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that, officers?
I mean, beg your pardon, after you.
It's like I just in my previous comment, this is an unprecedented amount of work that is being undertaken in one place, and what Peribah has seen is a number of major projects happening at the same time, which has had an impact in terms of congestion, disruption on the highway network. We have worked very closely with the City Council who are delivering the highway scheme to make sure that can be managed and mitigated. We've done lots of joined up communications around managing demand for travel in that area. Now, we expect that to sort of move back to normality as a lot of these projects come to their natural conclusion and are completed. But there will still be elements of disruption. We would like to think, and particularly the projects that TfWM is delivering around Sprint and the railway station, that will be completed way before July, before the Commonwealth Games. Again, we are coordinating very closely with the City Council around the highway works and making sure that those can also be completed in the most appropriate way. There is some logic behind some of the disruption that still exists, and whilst there are areas of highway that have been completed, it's not a simple case of we've done that bit so we can reopen that use, but all it does, it just shifts the congestion problem a little bit further, because you still need to get traffic to sort of merge together where we've got reduced capacity. So the intention is, and the strategy behind a lot of the work, particularly the highway work, is we get it to a point where it's complete and we remove all the traffic management in one go to minimise that much broader impact on the highway network. So it is something that has been flagged. We are aware of incidents, and just because of the proximity of Peribah to the M6 as well, when there is a knock-on incident on the M6, there is an even bigger impact through Peribah. So again, utilising the Regional Traffic Control and Coordination Centre to manage and oversee what happens in that location. And where we are able to is to change some of the things. I know during Sprint construction, we've been able to amend some of the traffic management to help alleviate some of those congestion issues. But I think it is the final push now to get that construction work done and continuing to engage with those businesses and the communities that, this is almost coming to the end of this work now, and there will be a marked improvement in terms of the overall level of service along that corridor.
I'll take Councillor John and then Councillor Akhtar.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I just want to say, Councillor Islam, thank you for your comments and concerns. But this is something that myself and Councillor John Hunt were saying about the flyover, for it not to be removed, because there's so many projects going on, and it's all about hitting deadlines and the congestion and so forth. However, if the flyover was saved, didn't get demolished, then maybe we wouldn't be going through all these concerns with traffic and so forth. I mean, we are all aware that this is big, massive projects, run up to Commonwealth Games, time's ticking. So, and a lot of people and the residents and the community are frustrated. One stop, in regards to the shops and businesses, they're shutting down. People are quitting their jobs. So it's a knock-on effect, not just for the people that are living there, but for the people who have got businesses, people that have to commute through there. And then when we have match days, this is something I mentioned again in full council, that there's going to be massive knock-on effects. So I think the main thing is it's now just moving forward. It's happened now. It's just moving forward and making sure that we hit the deadlines as requested. It is important that it is done because of the Commonwealth Games. But however, I understand why all this is happening. Some of it could have been if the flyover was saved, as it says, then there wouldn't be so much traffic congestion and so forth. So I just want to say that I do understand from all angles why everyone's coming from, including yourselves and including residents and the communities. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you very much.
Councillor Akhtar.
So we hear what you're saying, but now we want to put an emphasis, and so we want to know what measures all of you have taken to make sure that the jobs and the skills, as my colleague asked, that local people get those jobs. What are the measures you guys have put in place, or other agencies, to make sure that those jobs and this prosperity is beneficial to people who are suffering or suffered or waited in these deprived areas? That's what we want to know, sir.
It's a key part of what we do as part of our inclusive growth agenda. This has to be around how do people touch, taste and feel the benefit of that investment that is happening. And this is about changing life opportunities, and transport is a big part of that, whether it's actually people accessing skills, whether it's accessing employment, wider changes to the labour market. That's what this is trying to do now. As part of every single project that we take through our processes, as part of the business case, we have to show how this happens. Now, whilst there is a big strategic backdrop to all of that, it also then comes back to those conversations around how do we get to that circular economy of where do we actually get the supply chain for while those projects are being built. And again, that's working with our contractors, our consultants, and we've got lots of good examples of where we've been delivering projects in a locality, how they have drawn a number of new apprentices or workforce from within a certain distance around those works actually happening, so that it's actually feeding into the development of those projects and the actual delivery. It then comes back to the longer term legacy of that impact, in terms of, we often talk about, well, how do we make sure that these are the right jobs for the right and the right skills are in place? And that is a much broader discussion around what skill levels are required, where have we got areas of differing skill levels across the West Midlands. We know that there are certain parts of the West Midlands that have lower levels of attainment. So how do we actually start to level up those levels of attainment to make sure that we've got the right skills to support those industries and sectors which are growing across the West Midlands? And that then sort of leads back into the work that we do across the broader combined authority with our directorate around skills, the economy and communities, and making sure that we connect all of this up effectively. That transport, the actual physical delivery, the infrastructure is one part of the equation. And then it does come back to how is that integrated into the local community. Like I say, the overarching business cases for these transport schemes don't stack up if we are just talking about we've delivered a bit of transport infrastructure there. They build on the economic benefit, the social benefit, and the environmental benefit of the impact that they will have. So whilst it's not a direct answer, because I can't sort of sit here and give you examples of every single project, there are definitely areas around what we've done on our projects which are about that circular economy, and that is going to be a much bigger push in the future.
Thank you.
Can I just quickly, very quickly, I think after this whole thing, I think we might need a report on that, so we can actually see what went on and what percentage of local people had a share of this national cake that is going on in our region. And we need to see this, because that's why we councillors are here to ensure that those written documents actually do translate practically for the people in our region.
I'm happy to sort of bring something back that shows the assessment that happens. But until those projects are actually delivered and then the monitoring evaluation takes place, it's difficult to actually demonstrate how that is having a marked difference. A lot of these projects are still in delivery. There will be a ramp up time for that demand to grow. And whilst we make a big play around the localism agenda and how we want to support local supply chains, local businesses, we sit, and unfortunately, we sit at odds with national government around procurement and how we have to procure goods and services. So we can't just say, right, we want to go to this local supplier because they're local. That is against the law under current procurement regulations. So there are some much bigger challenges here that we need to address if we are really going to tackle that whole issue of the circular economy and making sure that the benefits are all localized and we help our local economy grow.
It's a fair point, though, that we could really do with such a report at the appropriate stage when you have the information. So thank you. Anything further on Perry Bar?
Just comment on the when we planned the scheme. The scheme was to check congestion and improve the public transport reliability on that corridor. At the moment, I commute that way frequently, and the long congestions on both sides of the work. Is that down to the works, or is down to the layout? If it's down to work, that's understandable. That'll be a temporary issue, and hopefully resolved once the work is completed. But if it's down to new layouts, in the area we can sort of are we monitoring that the current layout is not going to cause us problems, congestions, and will not give us the transport reliability. Both works. So I don't know if it's you can answer, but it's on Andy's there. I think on the call, it's something that I think it'll be we'll be missing our objectives if the layouts we are putting in did not give us the improved reliability for the bus and the sprint. Thank you.
Councillor Lam, happy to take that. So yeah, it's not due to the layout, it is due to the works that are in place at the moment. As Sandeep said, there's a lot of things come together in that location, sprint being one of them, and then the revision of the highway scheme. Now, at the moment, the traffic is being funneled all traffic is being funneled under the underpass to get Birmingham, Walsall, the through traffic, and anything else is required to go over the top onto the junction. The junction is in a temporary arrangement at the moment and isn't up to maximum capacity, which is meaning that all arms of that junction are seeing significant delays. There is a group that is working together, made up of bus operators, RTCC, Network Resilience Team, BCC, and the contractors who are on site to try and minimise that delay, and also to keep passengers and road users informed of the impact of that. But as the scheme goes forward, the capacity of that junction will improve as the signals, the permanent signal stages are put in place, and as and when the bus priority opens and we get the full capacity back, then we should see an improvement in journey times through that section.
I'm sure.
Yeah, just to reiterate what John said, we've been monitoring all of the traffic, so all of our bus network and the traffic through the RTCC. We also did a little bit of prediction through the different phases of all the different traffic management for those projects through that coordination group as well. And we've done some work on all the different alternative routes to look at traffic signals and sort of reallocate time around that as well, to try and to help with traffic moving around and away from that particular route. In terms of the post, once all the schemes are completed. I think your question was also around, will it deliver the benefits? That was part of that. Of course, all of the data sources that we've got coming in through the RTCC from various sensors that we've got out on the network, our traffic signals, etc. It will be able to tell us whether or not we've improved the journey times on buses, as well as also journey times on the road traffic network as well, just as part of that usual monitoring and evaluation that happens post-scheme. So we should be able to see the benefits being realised as all of those schemes come to a conclusion this spring.
Thank you.
Councillor John.
Thank you. There was, speaking in regards to traffic lights and so forth, a few weeks ago, I mean, it was mayhem. The traffic lights were not working on Walsall Road near One Stop. It was absolutely devastating for everyone. There was so much anger. I mean, I was in Asda shopping and it took me an hour just to get out the car park. And then the security from Bar One Stop had to basically come out and divert all the traffic from the people coming in and out, as well as drivers onto Walsall Road. The traffic lights weren't working. It was absolutely chaotic. It was absolutely crazy. There was loads of incidents with car accidents, drivers being frustrated with one another, not giving anyone the way. So I would like to ask, how are the traffic lights being managed on a regular basis? And if there is any concerns, who do we contact directly to get this looked at if the traffic lights do not work again, or for whatever reason there's some kind of mix-up, technical problem? Thank you.
Yeah, just to come back on that, Councillor Jan, the traffic signals that are around the highway works are all being managed through Birmingham City Council's Urban Traffic Control Centre, and with the project team there as well. So we can give you contact details offline, but of course through the RTCC they would have they monitor it, and they would have been able to report through to the UTC that there were issues and get people to attend that as soon as possible. I don't know the particular incident that you're talking about, so if the signals did fail, it would have been reported through, and the project team would have attended, the delivery team there as well. So but the UTC team at Birmingham City Council should be able to provide that information for you.
Okay, and it wasn't in the day that this happened. This was like about peak times, so it was like about 4 or 5 o'clock. The light stopped working, and I did report it to Birmingham City Council, and they did apologise in regards to that. But I just want to know, but you're going to forward me some information. So if this does occur, I can just make a phone call or report this and get this rectified as soon as possible, because it was absolutely mayhem.
Yeah. Okay, will do.
Thank you. I want to raise something which I noticed and I was pretty concerned about on the visit. You heard what I said about the lift at St Chad's being not working last Wednesday and also this afternoon. No, sorry, this morning. The issue I have got at Perry Bar, and I was quite shocked to see and learn this, is that access to the platforms for passengers will only be by lift. If the lifts are not working, then that means that there is no disabled access to the railway station. I would have thought that with a £30 million plus project, it ought to have been possible to assure compliant ramped access. On the to Walsall side, it's been completely destroyed, and on the one-stop side, what's happening there is that ramp is being maintained, but only for service access, so not for passengers. So if, like my friend on his recumbent, you fetch up at Perry Bar wanting to catch the train to Walsall or Birmingham and the lifts are out, tough, come back another day. That, I think, is pretty darned appalling. Now, the message I want to get across is that maybe that's compliant, but it's not 100% access, because as soon as those lifts break down, there's no access whatsoever. And I think that's an important point for future station design in the West Midlands, where we're improving facilities. We have worked hard on access over these many years. It's not complete, because the more you do, the more difficult projects are left behind. But I strongly feel that just saying lifts are the answer to access is simply not correct. I often go to Aston, and quite often the lift there is out of commission. Now, it's just not satisfactory. Would you, Anne and colleagues, or Liam like to comment on the particular situation at Perry Bar and whether anything can be done to restore full access? And secondly, as to further station refurbs or improvements or new stations, can we be assured that there will be ramped access?
Apologies, I'm on mute. Yes, when we met 10 days ago, I promised to go away and get you an answer to that in greater detail, which I will. I think it's worth noting that the ramped access that's there at the moment isn't actually compliant with the standards it needs to comply with to be used. So it wouldn't simply, to enter the station back into service, it wouldn't simply be possible to reopen the ramps that are there at the moment, because they are new lifts and they will have the provision in place. You know, they are new lifts being put in. We would expect them to perform at higher standard of reliability. What I've said we'll do, and what we will do, is confirm with the operator what the arrangements are, both to maintain those in working order, and also what the arrangements would be if there were an issue with their operation.
Future stations in the West Midlands, can we have assurance that it won't just be lifts, or can't we?
The new station schemes that we're opening, certainly in Walsall, will have lift access because there's not the space there to ramp them on either side. So there is the space to put the lifts and the stairs in, but not to have a separate access on some of those, simply because of the locations they're being constructed in. But what they will be in all cases, they will need to comply with all of the street accessibility standards. And as you've noted, that doesn't necessarily involve ramps, but those are designed with things like disabled people's groups consulted with.
Thank you. Councillor Lal.
Chair, I share your concern for the wheelchair users. While we can say that it's a lift or as we knew, but it's known that even new things can break down. In another 5 to 10 years' time, these new lifts will be old, and the failure rate of not working would rise. Anything with age. I mean, at the moment, we are saying that when we are say the lifts could be fixed within 1 hour, but we know that that's leading to somebody who can make sure that you can get the lift back in service within 1 hour. There's no guarantee. But if this current rent is not suitable, they're going to use it for service purposes only, why will it be too much hassle or too much expense to get it adapted that in future, any time in lifts go accident, that this ramp can be used for wheelchair users? I mean, is it too low? Can be try to get it upgraded that in emergencies that ramp could be used by the same people?
It would only access one platform, the other platform, the ramp's gone, as you know. Look, I don't want to prolong this because we're running a bit late. So, yeah, Councillor Huxtable, go on.
No, I'm waiting for the university.
Oh, right, okay. Was there anybody else?
I just wanted to, say, I just wanted to support you, really. I'm sorry, we've been here since morning. My head is going everywhere. But I remember from the last time I went to Perry Bar, I think the same excuse as well was that there is limited space, limited space is not where you want to tell someone who's in a wheelchair who wants to get to their interview or go and see family or just want to travel like any other person. I mean, it's completely unacceptable to tell them then that there's limited space, so we don't have ramp for you, so maybe go back to your house. It's a bit, that's not an excuse for me, basically.
As I say, I'm very happy to come back, as I promised at the time, with more detail about how the station will be operated in practice.
Thank you. Can we move on to university? Councillor Oxton.
Again, it's a very quick question and probably won't be able to be answered at the moment, but the Smithfield master plan envisages a metro extension from Digbeth all the way to the new university station. I'm just seeking reassurance that this has been thought about and that the site is future-proofed in terms of any connectivity desire that we might have as the combined authority in that transit corridor between Digbeth and University Station to provide a significant interchange thereat. Thank you, Chair.
Answer.
So I can talk to the site at university specifically, which actually is a very constrained site built up some squash courts and a car park. So we wouldn't expect that that would, that has not taken up a large amount of space that would otherwise be used for something else. I can't talk to wider extension plans. I'm not sure if Sandeep or other colleagues can at this point.
Just in terms of the provision of future metro services, the station has been designed within a footprint to accommodate the demand and the growth of the wider master plan area, which has taken some consideration of likely metro future routes. And that would be dependent on what other uses sort of happen in the interim period around the life sciences campus. But there will always be an intention to try and integrate those as close as possible within the public realm space that is being developed around the station. Again, this all comes back down to what the exact routings of a potential future metro are and what the likely demand would be for services within that location. But if it's going as far as has it been designed to actually have a metro interface, then no, but it will be looked at in the context of the broader master plan for the area.
Thank you. Okay. Anything further on the university at this stage? Okay, again, it's for noting, isn't it? Yeah. So can we move on to item 10? Which officer's leading on this one? Thank you, Liam. That's really good.
David, you there? From you.
Good afternoon. Sorry, you called me out there. I was not expecting to be the next item then. I'm just going to canter through this really quickly because I'm very aware of the time and we don't have a lot of it left. So the item, the paper that we brought to you is regarding the West Midlands Local Transport Plan and the engagement on the draft core strategy, which is now out in the public domain. Some of you will be aware last year we published a green paper which sought to sort of start a conversation around transport policy and strategy in the West Midlands and how we thought we needed to start looking at thinking differently about how we delivered and planned and managed the transport system in the region. So the core strategy builds on the feedback from that engagement, and that engagement also included discussions with West Midlands leaders about how they wanted us to go forward. And in a nutshell, essentially, the core strategy sets out a vision for West Midlands, which is a 45-minute region, and that's 45 minutes across the region by public or shared transport. But within that, there's a series of 15-minute neighbourhoods where people can access the things that they need to live their lives within reasonable distance, and generally they would be able to access those by walking, cycling, wheeling, and so on. What we set out in the core strategy is that to start moving forward, and we talk about 5 motives for change that we're going into detail about, is we need to see 3 impacts in terms of the transport system. And what we need to try and achieve is to reduce overall levels of traffic, improve accessibility, and also electrify the transport system. And what we've said in the core strategy is that to do that, we need to deliver behaviour change. Behaviour change is critical in terms of achieving the progress that we need to make, not just in terms of things like decarbonisation, but changing the way we use the transport system so that actually we have a fairer, a more equitable transport system for everyone. And in the core strategy, what we've done is set out 6 big moves, which frame the different policy agendas, policy and the toolkit that help us deliver the behaviour change. And what we're saying is these are sort of high-level principles and approaches. And across the West Midlands, obviously, there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to the problems that we have. Different people in different places require different solutions. And so what the core strategy does is sets out the sort of framework. And what we're now doing is starting to develop those big moves in more detail, alongside a set of 4 area strategies. We're working in close collaboration with local authority officers, which will translate the core strategy and the big moves into those local areas, and make sure that we come up with the right solutions for different parts of the West Midlands. So in terms of timescales, that work is ongoing now. We're out to consult on the core strategy as we speak until early April. And our intention is to go back to West Midlands Combined Authority Board in the summer with the final version of the core strategy, and at the same time seek approval to go out and consult on those big moves in more detail, and also those area strategies through the rest of 2022, and then with a view to sort of finalising and formalising the final full local transport plan later in 2022. There you go. That's my submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, we're on item 11.
That's why you confused me, see?
Yeah, I know. I'm always confused, don't worry about it. I've got Chris Byrne and Celia Hibbert indicated previously, yeah?
Thank you, David, for going through that as well. I've got a couple of things that I think are really positive to take from that document, and a couple of things I think we should look at in that document. I think one thing that was really important for me was that document highlighted that we're due to miss our decarbonisation plans if we don't act and if we don't address things. But then it was actually really good to see that the public, am I on the right item?
Yeah.
No.
I'm confused as well.
Which item are we on? Because I was told we're on item 10 just. What item are we on?
Well, I've just presented a local transport plan, so hopefully that one.
Yeah, the local transport plan. Yes. Sorry. So the local transport plan. It's actually really good to see that the public are so engaged with that and actually highlighted that it was environmental issues that are really important to them as well. Because I think if we did this consultation, I tried to speak about this a decade ago, we wouldn't have people highlighting the environment and active transport as things that were the public's priorities as well. So it's clear there's a cut through in society. I think if we just go down to some of the key details, 66% of people think that traffic is a problem. It's vital that we don't see electric cars as a solution to that problem. Electric cars are a solution to environmental issues, but they're not a solution to traffic problems. Because if we transition everyone to an electric car, we've still got the same traffic jams, it's just that they're electric. So it definitely needs to be noted that, while this will form a really important part of our decarbonisation plan, it's not going to affect things like traffic. So we need to support that while supporting other issues as well. And this is the point where I always bring up cycle lanes and how much we can revolutionise things with cycle lanes, and actually how much buy-in there is from the public if we attempt to get their buy-in. If we get 10 people onto a bike, it removes 55 metres of traffic from the road. If you've removed 55 metres of traffic from the road, people are starting to notice those traffic jams much, much less. And I think that's how we can sell it, because at the moment, if you look through some of the responses and some of the things people are saying, we're not bringing people along on the journey. And I think that's something really concerning for us as councillors and for Transport for West Midlands. Because if we look, the majority of people say that reducing car use is going to have to happen. The majority of people say that active travel is the way to do it. And they recognise that people won't walk or cycle without proper infrastructure. We know that from the responses, and we know that from our everyday lives as councillors. You know it from urban planning, you know it from everything you do. But then if we look at some of the responses, people are talking and responding to this as if we're all advocating for a car-free world. And now that's something that I'm concerned about, because I don't think anyone in here or anyone out there or anyone up there is actually advocating for a car-free world. What we're advocating for is a car and transport equal world where everyone's got equal access to transport. And then this elicits that really strong emotional response where we're not bringing people along on that journey. Because people talk about what they're worried about. They're talking about, oh, if I don't have a car, I won't be able to speak to my family. If I don't have a car, I won't be able to get to my job. But we need to keep telling people that's not what we're advocating. Because equally, if we go back to that, if we remove people from the road and get people cycling, actually, there'll be more road space for you to do that, for those things that are necessary, and the roads will be much more accessible for you. This won't cut down on your independence. It will make your journeys more reliable the more people we have on active transport. Because if we look on page 93, I believe it is, non-public transport users are the most keen on opposing public transport investment. That's an issue because things become to look as if they're a zero-sum game, as if you have to lose in order for people to benefit. And my question is, this is good, we're doing a good thing, this is a good thing, we welcome it from Transport for West Midlands, but why are we not able to get that cut through in society and convincing people? Because no one is advocating for a car-free future, and we need to make that really, really clear. The one thing I have is a more wider issue on the planning policy. Because if we look at page 114 and page 117, for some reason they're page 110 and 113 in your document packs, but the other way around on ours. We describe vibrant city centres and modern suburban neighbourhoods. Now, this is one thing that plagues British society, because we are addicted not just to inefficient modes of transport, we're addicted to inefficient modes of living as well. And so you as a transport authority can only do so much if we are hampered by the planning system. Because if we're building these low density houses in city centres in Birmingham, there are plans for houses within the ring road. We are planning for this future that's not dense enough to sustain these transport things. So I think it's great what we're doing here. But the governmental planning policy system, it's something we should highlight as a transport body. The planning system for residential dwellings creates transport black spots. Now, that's not our fault, but it's something we need to rail against because the government policy is mandating a car recovery future. How can we get past that?
Okay, do you want me to come back in now, Chair?
Yeah, of course.
Sure, thank you. Councillor Byrne, some really useful points there. Absolutely right, we're not advocating a car-free future, but we have to be honest that there is a need to think about how we kind of integrate and change our behaviours so that car isn't the only option for a lot of people, which it currently is. And you're absolutely right, that whole issue around taking people with us is going to be critical, and it is about sort of describing and discussing and having that that open conversation with people that there are trade-offs, and that unfortunately things aren't simply going to get better if we improve public transport in some areas and we build some cycle lanes. There is actually change of behaviour, and that means everyone. And in essence, a lot of the people who will bemoan the congestion and go, well, this is a problem, it needs to be solved, also have to kind of accept that they are part of that problem as well. And if everyone starts to think about their travel behaviours and start to do those things differently, then we can start seeing some change. But that will need engagement. It will need us to do things differently about taking people with us. And that sits with officers, but it also, of course, sits with members as well. And what we've said alongside the engagement is we want to continue that conversation with members to understand how we can help with those conversations with residents, with citizens at the local level to help us move some of those conversations forward. In terms of the comments around planning policy, I absolutely agree, and it's something that we need to look at more closely. One of the big moves within the core strategy highlights that relationship between transport and land use planning. Clearly, we're not going to change the way that the West Midlands is built and laid out overnight, and that's going to take a long time to sort of perhaps address some of the planning decisions that have been made over time, which have then resulted in some of the transport problems that we experience. But that doesn't mean to say that things we're doing now can't be built in the right way, in the right places, to make sure that we're trying to capitalise on those opportunities to drive more sustainable behaviours.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Councillor Hibbert.
No, I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, you did. Okay. Is there anything further on this? I've got just one thing to say here. I noticed that the consultation period ends, I think, it's early April, isn't it? It's the 4th.
Yeah.
Now, we'd be here for a very long time if everybody started to comment on this here and now. Oh, I wouldn't fancy that. So I think the best that I can say is really that individual TDC members should be encouraged to say whatever you want to say, if possible by deadline. Does that make sense? Yeah. And I think we just need to leave it at that because it's getting really quite late. Yeah. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That's some good points.
Because as you see from the recommendations, we're supposed to provide comment and advice, and it's just not going to happen this afternoon, is it? Apart from Chris's contribution. Thank you. Right, so we go back to number 10 now. So who's leading on this? Kate, is it you or Andy?
No, it's me.
Okay. The best man for the job is a man. Yeah, go on.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So what you've got appended, well, attached within the pack is the Transport for West Midlands 2022-2023 Directorate Plan, and it was an opportunity to share this draft with the Transport Delivery Committee, which gives an insight into the headline, the high-level deliverables agreed for the forthcoming financial year. So we have taken the view that we set out, would always produced an overarching document which captures all of our corporate aims and objectives and how we deliver those across the region over a set time period. Every year we go away and review the high-level deliverables and make sure that they are in line with the aims and objectives, and it's probably quite timely that these two items were transposed on the agenda, because just to point out as well that the work that's been done around the high-level deliverables within the 2022-23 plan have been done in line with and aligned to those within the newly refreshed local transport plan. So there is absolute alignment within that. This plan will be finalised ahead of the new financial year and will sit underneath the Midlands Combined Authority business plan in due course. But as I said, it is currently in draft format, and we wanted to make sure that TDC members had the opportunity to see it and comment.
If there's no comment right now, or not much, how long have people got to come back to you?
Well, as soon as possible, really. We do need to have this published in the new financial year, so any time over the next sort of few days would be very, very helpful.
Thanks. Members, any comments or questions? Thank you then. Yes, sorry.
No, don't apologise. I was late putting my hand up, but of course, we're expected to respond to all these things, and yet we don't get reports until the 11th hour. So I just want to make a comment, and I've made the comment before, you know, 11:30 on, 12:15 on Saturday, one report, and then, and I'm not blaming Tanya on this, it's when she gets a report, she feeds them through to us, and then another one at just after 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. It's frankly not good enough.
Couldn't agree more.
Noted, Councillor, on your concerns around late circulation of papers. I do understand this particular one should have been within the original pack.
Yes, so I can confirm that the whole materials for this pack were circulated, for TDC was circulated, obviously within what the Constitution says was 5 clear working days. What you would have received is an additional pack of the CA board papers, which went out
Saturday.
So and so that is the extra copies that you get, and obviously that's for your information. But in terms of the actual papers that TDC are to review and comment on, were done within the clear 5 working days of the Constitution.
Yeah, but Tanya, again, it's not your fault, but when I get the message that I can't have a paper copy on the due date because that's the Combined Authority policy to use less paper. They're so environmental, these people. Then what I have to do is get it done at Walsall Council. I didn't get the papers until late on Friday. That's why I didn't really have much time to study them. That's the kind of problem we're all getting, and it's just not right because we can't do justice to stuff. Any further?
Sorry, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just a really quick one, like 10 seconds. Page 51 of the pack. There's a little, it's a linguistic thing here, and it's possibly just because I've looked at it with fresh eyes and people who have written it aren't looking for it with fresh eyes. It reads, avoid behaviour change for the better, avoid growth that helps everyone. Which might be worth pointing out. It's just because of the way it's phrased. Obviously, someone's designed it. It's really clear to the person that's designed it. But if someone external ever looks at that, it says avoid change for the better, avoid growth that helps everyone. If you're an external, you've never seen it before. And when this gets published, it's got to be seen by a lot of people that haven't seen it before. So it does just look a bit strange.
Nice one. Okay, so again, yes, it's for noting, and any comments to Sunday ASAP, please. Right, on we go. Number 12, a paper's been circulated, hasn't it, John?
Yes, it has, Chair. Thank you. Just, I suppose, in the interests of time, there is a slight update to the paper. I don't intend to go over everything that's there, and these comments were picked up in the Chair's remarks earlier. But since this paper was written, we have received formal confirmation that we will be getting a further 6 months of bus funding to take us through to October, and this has been extended to 9 months for the West Midlands to give us stability of bus services during the Commonwealth Games. However, it is awaiting ministerial approval for that uplift from the 6 to the 9, and we don't yet know the quantum of that funding or any terms and conditions that are related to it. So we are just working that through with colleagues from the DFT and Treasury. And it's also worth saying that it's likely that despite that funding, it's an elongation of funding. It doesn't address all of the issues, and we are still facing that cliff edge that has now moved from October through to January. But we are hopeful that the extra 3 months will mean that patronage and therefore revenue will recover further during that period, and we will have that better stay of execution as we go forward. We are obviously still making the case that we need more funding to continue beyond that, so that we can maintain service and can continue to deliver the aspirations of the region. But there are likely to be those further funding challenges for operators as we go, and they will be seeking to resize their networks from January as we sit here now.
Members, any comment? It's okay, but it's pretty concerning, isn't it? You have visions of a substantial loss of network next year. I hope it doesn't happen. Okay, can we move on to item 13 then?
So I'll take this, Chair, and just noting the comments that have been made about papers that have been circulated. Obviously, we've got the Combined Authority Board on Friday. We've got a number of reports that are going. Friday's CA board is the last one until June. So quite important that we have a number of resolutions, particularly around the CRSTS funding package as well. So we've got 5 reports that are on. The first one is around the City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement, noting that we've made good progress in terms of our programme being well received by government officials and the Department for Transport, but we haven't yet got any outcome on what we will be fully awarded as part of that as well, and we're not expecting to get that by Friday. So because the CRSTS does include things like highway maintenance funding and the former integrated transport block, which most of the local authorities need to settle and move forward on with their highways maintenance programmes, we are making a recommendations for our Section 151 officer, Linda Horn, to be able to receive the grant, subject to it being within the realms of what we've already submitted through to government as well. And that would just allow us to make sure that we can make those financial awards to each of the local authorities next year to carry on with those programmes as well. In addition to that, we've got a number of other reports. So there's the EV charging spine. There is business case approval for Sprint Phase 2, which will lead on from the work that Sandeep and his team have been delivering over the last couple of years for Sprint Phase 1. And then also for the Metro depot, in terms of the expansion that is required, particularly to stable the increasing tram fleet that we've got that will service the various extensions, including Wednesbury to Brylee Hill extension when that opens. And then also for traction power for Metro as well. Obviously, with more trams, more lines, we need more power in order to make sure that that can work as well. So we'll be looking to agree the full business cases, but again, subject to the CRSTS funding package coming in line with what we've submitted as an agreed programme with government as well.
I needed to say that two of these items are to be taken in private. I think, Tanya, that's correct. That's the electric vehicle.
There's content within the pack that you've received that are being discussed within the private session of CA board. So anything that's now discussed, if you're going to go into commercially sensitive detail, we'll need to close the meeting.
So what I suggest is, if there's any discussion on the other three, isn't it? Then we take that first, then we go into private briefly, because we've got a famous member of the public over there who will have to step out of the meeting. Is that okay? Right. So, what have we got first? The first one was City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. Yeah, is that correct?
Yeah. That's correct.
Any comments on that? No. Second one is. Come on.
The second one was the EV charging, so we'll leave that one till a private session.
Over. Yeah.
The third one is the A34 and A45 Sprint Phase 2. With Sandeep in the room, he'll be able to answer any questions on that one.
But that is private.
There's all the elements of that in the private agenda.
Yeah.
What are the other two?
The other two were the Metro depot expansion.
Yeah.
And then the Line 1 power upgrades in order to sort of meet power requirements for those extensions as well.
Yeah. Okay. Metro depot expansion. Members, have you got anything on that? No. And then power.
The power. Yeah. So in terms of the increased substations and power for the line extensions.
No.
Members, anything on that?
No.
It's fatigue setting in. Right. So what I'd like to do is not chuck you out just yet. Is that I'll jump to item 14, which is report back from member engagement groups. And the thing to say about that is, Councillor Val pointed it out in our pre-meeting. Look, by definition, these reports that you get are very brief to the TDC, but if any member wants to have the notes of these engagement groups, then they're encouraged to actually take advantage of that and ask for whatever you want, and it will be supplied. Okay, so is there anything anyone would like to say or point out on the member engagement groups update? No. Okay, Mr. Thomas, if you'd care to sit down for a moment, and we'll bring you back in when we finish the private business. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.